They say you'll remember the moment your life changes forever. Not in sweeping montages, but in small, stupid details. Mine? The fluorescent light above the conference table was flickering. Not fast, just enough to be annoying, distracting. And when the new CEO turned the slide deck to the compensation analysis, I caught myself staring at that blinking light instead of at the numbers that ended my career. My name is Daniel Rourke. I'm 58 years old. Until 37 minutes ago, I was Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations at Halverton & Cole, a legacy manufacturing firm that's been around longer than most countries have lasted in peace. I ran the Industrial Solutions Division, biggest margins in the company for 2 years straight, bigger than R&D, bigger than consumer products, even after they did their splashy digital rebrand. My team didn't just hit targets. We set the bar. And then we kept raising it. None of that mattered this morning. She wore white. The CEO, I mean. A pristine, sharp-lined pantsuit like something out of a corporate fashion brochure. Her name is Harper Vane. She joined 6 months ago from some consultancy with a 3-letter acronym, all slick slides and buzzwords like agility and culture rebalancing. I knew the type. Young, decisive, shiny, and deeply in love with disruption for disruption's sake. She had a vision. I was not in it. We're optimizing for leaner verticals and operational simplicity, she said. Her voice was even, cool, like someone practicing neutrality. Unfortunately, Daniel, your compensation structure doesn't align with our new framework. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at the slide, like I was a cell in a spreadsheet that needed formatting. My name was highlighted in red. Excuse me? I said, but it came out quieter than I meant. My throat was dry. You're an expense line that's out of alignment, she said. That exact phrase, as if I were a misfiled invoice. We can do more with less, especially younger talent. She didn't smile. She didn't frown either. Just sat there, a sheet of corporate detachment draped over her face like a veil. Across from her, Darren from HR handed me a single-page termination agreement, like he was giving me a dinner menu. I read the first line and saw the date. Today. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I took the pen they offered, black, branded with the company logo, and I signed the paper like I was approving a purchase order. My hand didn't shake. I made sure of it. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and looked around the room one last time. Beige walls, acoustic panels, a water cooler I helped fund when we finally got rid of the plastic bottles. I said nothing. Then I walked out. The hallway was empty. It was always empty in the executive wing before 10. I passed the digital wall display showing quarterly growth projections, numbers I had shaped, deals I had closed, teams I had built. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket. I didn't look. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The security guard at the desk, Ramon, nodded at me. Big day, Mr. Rourke? Something like that, I said. Outside, the morning was gray. Not raining, not sunny. Just that in-between kind of weather that doesn't make up its mind. I stood on the curb, briefcase in one hand, envelope in the other, waiting for the ride I hadn't called yet. I still hadn't processed what happened. It was like my brain refused to file the event under real. 30 years at the same company, and now I was standing outside like a visitor. I remembered my first day. I was 28, still new to fatherhood, wearing a tie that didn't match my shirt. Back then, Halverton & Cole felt like a promise. It had floors that smelled like old books and coffee, and the people knew each other's birthdays. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. You could build a life there. I did. I missed my daughter's piano recitals, postponed vacations, flew cross-country to close deals that should have gone to junior execs, because I believed in the place, because I thought that's what loyalty meant. Turns out, loyalty is a one-way street with a trap door. I thought about my team, about Julia, who I'd promoted from intern to director over 6 years. About Mark, who named his son after me. About all the late nights, all the early mornings, the wins, the losses, the jokes we passed around the break room while microwaving sad little frozen lunches. They didn't know yet. Or maybe they did. My phone buzzed again. I still didn't look. Instead, I sat on the bench outside the glass doors, envelope on my lap, jacket still buttoned. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger requires energy. I felt hollow. Not empty exactly, just disconnected. Like I had been unplugged from something I hadn't realized was feeding me. The door behind me opened. I didn't turn around. Footsteps passed. Then silence again. Eventually I stood, slipped the envelope into my briefcase, and started walking. No destination in mind. I just knew I couldn't sit there any longer. Not like a man waiting to be picked up from the wreckage. I walked with my back straight and my jaw clenched, not because I wasn't broken, but because if I let myself fall apart, I wasn't sure I'd know how to stop. And deep down, in the place I didn't want to look at yet, something started burning. Not rage, not grief. Something colder, sharper. Resolve. The first morning after they let me go, I sat at my kitchen counter and stared at a cup of coffee I didn't remember brewing. The house was too quiet. I wasn't used to silence before 7 a.m. I was used to the hum of email alerts, back-to-back Zooms, texts from the Singapore office, and the ache behind my eyes before sunrise. But now there was just the refrigerator humming and the faint scratching of Toby, my 12-year-old Labrador, as he settled into the same spot on the rug he always did. I didn't check my phone. It buzzed a few times, likely condolences dressed up as thinking of you texts, probably from the people who voted yes in the boardroom, then waited until I was gone to pretend they didn't. I let it ring. By day 3, I started going on long walks with Toby, mornings mostly. He seemed to understand something had changed. He didn't tug on the leash like he used to. He just walked beside me, quiet and steady. We did laps around the neighborhood, past the same old hedges and the new condos, where people in their 20s paid triple what I did and called it freedom. One night, I drank a little too much bourbon and scrolled through LinkedIn. The CEO had updated her profile photo. Now it was her standing at a podium with the company logo behind her, arms open, mid-speech, probably some keynote on innovation. The caption read, "Thrilled to lead the next chapter of growth at Halverton and Cole." I stared at it for a full minute. Then I closed the app and deleted it. The calls kept coming. Julia called twice and left voicemails that started upbeat and crumbled by the end. Mark sent an email that read like an apology. He didn't quite have the courage to say out loud. "It's not the same without you," he wrote. "They don't get it." I didn't respond, not out of spite, at least not fully. I just didn't know what I could say that wouldn't sound like bitterness in a nice suit. And the truth was, I was bitter. I was angry. But the anger didn't shout. It sat in me, quiet and heavy, like a coiled spring. The first real crack came 2 weeks in. I was sitting on the back porch, notebook open, pen untouched, when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't expected. Olivia Cho, one of my best protégés. Young, brilliant, one of the few who still knew how to talk and listen. I answered. "Daniel," she said. Her voice was low, clipped. "You didn't hear this from me." I leaned forward. "Go on." "They're scrambling. Q1 numbers came in flat, way below forecast. Morale's in the gutter. Half the project leads are threatening to walk." I didn't say anything. "There's talk that the board's not happy," she continued. "They think Harper's cuts went too deep too fast. But no one will admit it out loud." She paused. I could hear typing in the background, or maybe her nervously tapping a pen. They miss you. Some of them. They just don't know how to say it. I felt something twist in my chest. Not pride, something meaner. Appreciate the call, Olivia. I just thought you should know. I hung up and stared at the wood grain of the porch rail. The spring inside me uncoiled a fraction, not from satisfaction, but from recognition. They had made a mistake, and now they knew it. That night, I opened a new notebook, leather-bound, something my daughter gave me for my birthday last year. I hadn't touched it. Felt too nice to waste on grocery lists and meeting minutes. On the first page I wrote, "What they forgot." I started slow. At first it was just names, people, systems, relationships. Which vendors hated last-minute changes? Which clients expected calls before the quarterly brief? The unspoken alliances between departments. The little rituals that kept the culture from falling apart. I wrote about the unacknowledged glue that held Halverton and Cole together. The glue I had been. Not to gloat, not yet, but because no one else would. Day by day, the entries grew longer. I wrote in the mornings, before the world fully woke up. I'd sit with a black coffee and map out everything I knew. Not just about the company, but about how things actually worked. Not the way they looked in org charts and pitch decks, but in motion, in people, in loyalty earned over years. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But it felt like reclaiming something they tried to erase. Some evenings I'd walk past the office building, just far enough to see the lights in the upper floors still glowing after hours. Once I saw Darren, the HR guy, heading out with a tired look on his face. I watched from across the street, hands in my pockets. I wondered if he'd recognize me without the badge, the suit, the title. He didn't. I didn't wave. I just turned around and kept walking. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filling with purpose. I wasn't gone. I was waiting. The first meeting was in a coffee shop near the marina, the kind of place where the lattes come with leaf-shaped foam and no one wears socks. I wore a blazer anyway. Old habits. Across the table sat Eric Mendoza, early 30s, sharp eyes, an ex-engineer who'd co-founded Kaizen Dynamics, a smaller competitor Halverton and Cole had once dismissed as scrappy but scattered. I remembered Harper brushing them off in a meeting, calling them a rounding error. She was wrong. Eric sipped his drink like he didn't have time for small talk. "Let me guess. You didn't call me for the pastries." I smiled. "You want their clients, don't you?" He raised an eyebrow. "Which ones?" I slid a sheet of paper across the table. 3 names, all big players in industrial logistics, all poised to renew annual contracts with Halverton and Cole. The same contracts I had negotiated, nurtured, and personally maintained for the last 5 years. Relationships they took for granted. Relationships I still understood better than anyone. Eric scanned the list. They're locked in, supposedly. Not if you offer faster integration, a flexible SLA, and one face-to-face meeting from someone who knows how to speak their language. He looked up. "And that's you?" I didn't answer. He already knew. That afternoon, I became an unofficial consultant. No paper trail, no title, just a private number, a quiet agreement, and full access to everything I knew about how Halverton and Cole operated. And more importantly, where they were weakest now. Harper's cuts had bled the support teams dry. Internal response times had slowed. Client frustrations were starting to bubble. They just didn't have anyone senior enough left to smooth things over. Kaizen moved fast, younger, leaner, hungrier. I gave them insight on positioning, narrative structure for their pitch decks, and which metrics to emphasize to sound bigger than they were. I didn't need a desk. I needed a ripple. 3 weeks later, one of those clients, Praxlin Freight, signed a preliminary letter of intent with Kaizen. I got the text during breakfast. Eric didn't say much, just 2 words. It landed. I put my phone down and smiled into my coffee. The next day, Halverton's stock dipped 2 points on rumors of an impending contract loss. Nothing catastrophic. Not yet. But it made the internal news cycle. One of my old colleagues forwarded the email. Subject line, "No cause for alarm," which is always what they say right before the alarms go off. A few days later, I met with a small group of former colleagues, off the record, after hours, in a quiet bar in Midtown. They came in one by one, looking over their shoulders like we were planning a coup. Maybe we were. "Numbers are off," Julia said, swirling ice in her glass. "Leadership's scrambling. Harper's pushing everything to the junior teams. It's chaos." Mark leaned in. "She blames legacy systems." "Translation," I said. "She blames me." They both laughed, but it wasn't funny. I listened more than I spoke that night, took mental notes. Harper had accelerated the reorg, shuffled roles, axed long-standing procedures in the name of agility. But without me, no one could explain the domino effects. Teams were stepping on each other's toes. Clients were complaining about inconsistencies. Junior managers were burning out. That week, Kaizen asked if I wanted a formal role. Head of strategy, equity, full benefits, a fresh title, and a bigger stage. I said no. It wasn't because I wasn't tempted. There was something undeniably satisfying about watching the machine I built start to stall without the one part it thought it could replace. But I wasn't ready to plant a new flag just yet. I wasn't done watching the fallout. Instead, I kept my position quiet, my influence subtle. Introductions here, guidance there. I helped Kaizen land a second client by adjusting their onboarding process, one I'd originally designed at Halverton years ago. They just made it faster, smoother, easier to scale. Whispers started. I know because they reached me, through texts, offhand mentions, LinkedIn messages from people who never used to return mine. There was a rumor going around that I'd landed softly and was now positioning a rival. The board, I was told, had started to question Harper's long-term vision. The same board that nodded along while she dismantled the scaffolding I'd spent 3 decades building. I didn't gloat. I didn't post any cryptic status updates. I didn't leak anything to the press. But when I walked by the Halverton building one afternoon, I paused across the street, watching employees rush out with takeaway lunches and tired expressions. A few of them looked familiar. No one noticed me. That's when the hunger came back. Not for revenge. Something purer. The hunger to build again, but smarter this time. Cleaner. I'd been so embedded in one company for so long, I'd forgotten how to move outside its walls. Now I was moving like a shadow, and no one could stop me. I went home that night and opened my notebook. The one that said, "What they forgot," on the front page. On a new sheet I wrote, "What comes next?" And then I started to write. 6 months to the day after they fired me, I was back on the 32nd floor of Halverton and Cole. Not as an employee, not as a supplicant, and not for vengeance, though I'd be lying if I said it wasn't sweet. They reached out quietly, through a private email. The sender was Henry Locke, longtime board member, once proudly indifferent to anyone who didn't wear cufflinks, worth more than my first car. The subject line read simply, "Coffee." I knew what it meant. Harper was drowning. Kaizen had secured 3 of Halverton's long-standing accounts, and 2 others were in active review, which is code for 1 foot out the door. Morale was down. Retention was a disaster. The young talent Harper brought in had burned through budgets and patience, and then left as quickly as they came, chasing shinier offers from shinier startups. She'd stripped the company for speed, but forgot you still need an engine. So now the board wanted to talk. They booked a private conference room in a hotel off Madison, a neutral site, quiet and discreet. No logos, no witnesses, just Locke, two other board members, Simone Carr and Elias Wells, and me. I wore navy, no tie, the quiet confidence of a man with options. Locke opened with the obligatory pleasantries. "Daniel, thank you for making the time. We recognize that some decisions made earlier this year may have lacked foresight," I offered without smiling. He winced. Simone jumped in. "Let's not dance around it. We made a mistake." I nodded, folding my hands on the table. "Yes, you did." Elias cleared his throat. "We want to hear your thoughts about the current situation, about what comes next." I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Then I spoke. "You replaced institutional memory with ideology. You gutted operational knowledge in favor of optics. You let Harper treat legacy as a liability, not an asset. And now you're surprised the floor's falling out." No one interrupted. "You wanted cheaper," I continued. "Now you're paying for it. Client attrition, broken workflows, brand erosion, employee exhaustion. It didn't take long." Locke exhaled through his nose. "So what would you do?" "I already did it," I said, "with Kaizen. But if you're asking what it would take to course-correct Halverton, we are." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded page. Nothing flashy, just bullet points, typed and printed on plain paper. "A transition plan," I said, sliding it forward. "Not to bring me back. I'm not interested in that. But this will get you out of the hole, provided you still have time." Simone read over the list. Rebuilding client-facing teams, restoring pre-cut internal comms roles, cross-training for continuity, and most importantly, leadership recalibration. I'd named specific names. None were hers. One was Harper's. Locke looked up. "You really won't come back?" Number I gave this company 30 years. It gave me a severance envelope. I'm not here for redemption. "But you are here," Elias said quietly. I looked at him. He wasn't being smug. He was being honest. "I'm here," I replied, "because I still care about what we built, and I won't let it rot just to prove a point." Simone put down the paper. "There's something else I want to say," she said. "When we sat at that table and let Harper cut you loose, I didn't say a word. I should have." I raised my eyebrows. "You were quiet." "I was comfortable," she corrected. "Too comfortable to stand up." I nodded once. Apology accepted. We stood. No handshakes, no dramatic farewells, just acknowledgements. I took the stairs down to the lobby instead of the elevator, not for symbolism. I just needed the space to breathe. But as I passed the mezzanine level, the elevator doors slid open behind me. She stepped out. Harper. She didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. Her suit was still white, but it hung differently now, creased, slightly frayed at the cuffs. She looked like someone who'd stopped believing her own pitch deck. We locked eyes. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't say a word. I just smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't smug. It was a quiet, knowing smile. One that said, "You remember what you said to me in that room? We can do more with less? Turns out you were wrong, and she knew it." She looked down. Then she walked past me, into the hallway, heels echoing on the marble like a retreat. I exited through the side door. Outside, the city hadn't changed. Horns blared, cabs screeched, pedestrians hustled past like always. But I'd changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't desperate to prove anything. I'd already done it. Victory didn't feel like a standing ovation or a champagne toast. It felt like stillness, like reclaiming your name after someone tried to erase it. And in that stillness, beneath the satisfaction, there was something else too. Sadness. Not for me. For what they threw away. I hailed a cab. As I climbed in, I caught my reflection in the window. Older, a little grayer, but steady. They'd tried to reduce me to a number on a spreadsheet. Turns out, I was the equation. The mornings are quiet here. No traffic hum, no calendar alerts pinging on my phone. Just the sound of wind cutting through the pine trees outside the cabin, and the occasional bird scratching at the feeder I finally remembered to fill. I wake when the sun does, not because I have to, but because I want to. There's something sacred about starting the day before the world gets loud. The cabin isn't large. 2 bedrooms, a small deck that faces a lake that shimmers just right around 7 a.m. I bought it 3 months ago, tucked away in the Adirondacks. A younger version of me would have called it idle, unproductive, maybe even a waste of time. Now, it feels like breath. Some days I fish, most days I write. I've filled up 3 notebooks since I got here. Not memoirs exactly, just fragments. Lessons, reflections, half-baked advice scribbled between coffee sips. I don't write for legacy. I write to make sense of what I've lived. And in between all that, I talk to people. Young people mostly. Not as a boss, not as some corporate oracle on a speaking tour. Just as a man who's seen the inside of something that looked unbreakable. Until it wasn't. I mentor 3 founders now. Smart, earnest, still idealistic. They call from co-working spaces and underfunded offices with flickering lights and too much caffeine in their veins. I listen more than I talk. That took me years to learn. Last week I watched a live stream of Halverton's quarterly update. Harper's gone. No press release, no send-off, just a quiet replacement and a sanitized footnote about leadership realignment. The board installed a new CEO, someone from internal ops, someone I once helped hire. She's competent, grounded. I think she'll steady the ship, but I didn't feel anything watching it. No victory, no vindication, just distance. They're still using some of the systems I built, though they've renamed them, rebranded them. That used to bother me. Now I smile. Let them put whatever labels they want on it. What matters is that it works, that it helps. That's the real legacy, I think. Not titles or buildings or slide decks, but the things that quietly keep people afloat after you're gone. A few days ago, I came across a photo I hadn't seen in years. Me, Julia, Mark, Olivia, and a few others at some end-of-year dinner, half tipsy and half exhausted. I had a paper crown from a Christmas cracker tilted sideways on my head, and someone had written King of Ops on a napkin in Sharpie. I laughed when I saw it, really laughed. I kept that photo. It reminded me that what I built wasn't just margins or strategies. It was people. And that mattered more than I ever gave it credit for at the time. Today, after a long walk around the lake, I sat down to write something different. Not notes, not fragments, but a letter. To them. My team, the ones who stuck around, the ones who left, the ones who watched me get pushed out and didn't know what to say. I don't blame them. I wouldn't have known either. Here's what I wrote. To my old team, by the time you read this, months, maybe years, will have passed since I left the 32nd floor. Some of you were there that day. Some of you weren't. Doesn't matter. You were all part of what we built. And I've been thinking a lot about that word lately. Build. We didn't just hit numbers. We created something real. A culture, a rhythm, a standard. And yes, they let me go. And yes, for a while I was angry, hurt. But time has a way of sanding the edges off even the deepest cuts. What's left now is gratitude. You gave me some of the best years of my life. You challenged me, taught me, laughed with me, argued with me, stayed late with me. You made it matter. I don't know where you all are now, some still there, some somewhere new, some leading your own teams. I hope you're doing it better than I did. I hope you're remembering that leadership is about more than performance reviews and pivot tables. It's about people, always has been. I've found peace in a quieter place now. I still believe in hard work, in strategy, in ambition. But I've learned that letting go isn't failure. Sometimes it's the most grown-up thing a person can do. So this letter isn't a goodbye. It's a thank you for the loyalty, the effort, the trust. Keep going. Keep building. Just don't forget who you are when the titles fall away. With respect, Daniel Rourke. When I finished writing it, I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just folded the page and slipped it into a drawer. Maybe I'll send it one day. Maybe I won't. It's enough that it's written. The truth is, I'm free now. Not because I won, not because they lost, because I finally understand that none of it defines me. Not the office, not the salary, not even the legacy. What matters is that I walked away with my name intact, and this time I chose the next page.